thanks for the invite today, myself and Jack, to speak to distinguished audience here. We were up here a couple of months ago when we had the previous event, and myself and Jack, I felt it was fantastic because we wouldn't be exposed to that type of situation before, where you have incubation companies here, and I learned an awful lot. So thanks very much for attending today. As I said, we're delighted to be here. I'll take the first part of the presentation, and Jack will do the second part. Probably take about 35 minutes, and then we'll take questions at the end. It was interesting there. I was reading, I think, on the Sunday Business Post there recently that the Chartered Accountants of Ireland did a survey of their members, and 88% of the members felt that they were not adequately informed about AE, which is auto enrolment. So it's interesting. There is onus on the government, I feel, to push more information out there to employers, because a lot of small companies don't, and it's not their fault, don't know about AE and what the implications are. So what is auto enrolment? And as I said, the short word is AE. Auto enrolment is a new retirement savings scheme which people will automatically be enrolled in once they meet certain requirements. So automatically, if you meet certain requirements, you're going to be auto enrolled by your employer. And why has it been brought in? They reckon about 800,000 PAYE employees currently in Ireland are not members of a pension scheme, or have not their own private pension. The government have termed this auto enrolment My Future Fund. So what you're doing is they're trying to encourage people to fund for their retirement. As I said, a lot of employees have not made provision for their retirement, and as a result, obviously, the state don't want them to be kind of dependent on the state going forward when they reach retirement. And this is the mouthful: the National Automatic Enrolment Retirement Savings Authority, the state agency responsible for managing the pension scheme, NASRA for short. And it will be also administered by Tata Consultancy Services. So the state agency will be NASRA, and then obviously it'll be administered by Tata Consultancy Services. So, big question: who will qualify for auto enrolment? Employees between the ages of 23 and 60 and earning 20,000 to 80,000 yearly. So that's the criteria to be auto enrolled. Employees not making any pension contribution through payroll software that fall within these parameters or brackets. So what they'll do is they'll look at the salary you're on, look at your age, but they'll also look at the payroll. And if there isn't a contribution going through, a pension contribution, you're going to be auto enrolled. And if you're outside those parameters, if you're outside the age of 60 and 23, you can opt yourself if you wanted to be auto enrolled. When will it start? And this is interesting, because the previous minister, Mr. Humphreys, was no longer obviously in the government, and she brought in legislation that was going to start on the 30th of September this year. Recently, Jack Chambers, basic Minister for Public Expenditure, because of the, I suppose, uncertainty currently in the global financial markets and tariffs, he's kind of said that we're probably looking at the start of the new year, which is 2026. Now, to be honest with you, I think that's optimistic as well, but they've made a commitment, and we'll see what happens. They haven't appointed investment managers yet, but they're in the process. Investment managers are in the process of tendering to obviously look after the funds that come in. So there's a bit of work to be done. and we'll see what happens. So how will it work for businesses? What's involved? In year 1 to 3, the employer will pay 1.5% of an employee's salary. That also will include any bonuses, BIK commissions that goes through payroll. The employer will pay 1.5 and the state will top that up by 0.5%. So it's not, you're not going to get tax relief yourself on your contribution of 1.5% for the first 3 years. You're compensated by state paying a bonus 0.5 into the pension pot of your salary or of your remuneration. It's interesting, in year 10, the employer contribution goes to 6%. And as I'm saying to George there on, it's quite chunky, you know, and the employee goes to 6% and the state pays the bonus of 2%. As I said to George there, most companies, it's 5 and 5, you know, that have their own company pension scheme. But that's the calendar, I suppose, for the next 10 years in relation to the contribution. And essentially, for every €3 an employee contributes, the state will contribute €1. And instead of tax relief on employee contributions, the state will make a contribution equivalent to 25% tax relief. So if you're in a group company pension scheme, say with Boston Scientific, you would be required to say match the employer's contribution of 5%. That 5% that you're going to pay comes off your gross each month. And that's the way you get tax relief in a group pension. And it's different with auto enrollment. You don't get tax relief. What you do is you get a bonus that's equivalent, the bonus equivalent to about 25% tax relief. And so an example, so John is 24 years of age, he's an intern, and in year 1 to 3, this is just an example, the employee would pay 1.5% of 20,000. The employer matches that, and the state would pay 0.5 of that, which is €100, and the total contributions on a yearly basis is invested under the auto enrolment banner. And you can see there, as we go through the years, obviously it increases. So he meets the criteria because he's 24 and he's on a salary of 20,000. If he was on a salary of 19,000, he wouldn't meet the criteria. He wouldn't have to be auto enrolled. Points to note, this is an interesting one. Myself and Jack were just talking about it. People often ask me, well, you know, I'm in auto enrolment or I'm in a pension scheme, but particularly with auto enrolment, what happens if I die before I retire? The value of the fund is paid to the estate and is taxable to the beneficiary. And contributions be taken as a percentage of gross salary to include overtime benefits, bonuses, and taken from the net salary. I mean, I was just giving an example. Myself and Jack were talking there before the presentation. Somebody was on, who meets the criteria and say is on 50,000 and is 25 years of age and gets a bonus before the year end of 30. That 30 basically will have to be the contribution of one the higher salary and not the higher salary, the salary and the bonus, which is interesting. Initially, I would have thought it would just go on the gross salary, but they're including anything that is put through payroll, like BIK, overtime, bonuses, you know, Christmas bonuses, which, yeah, it could cause an issue with some employers, but that's the legislation. Employer contributions are fully deductible against corporation trading profits. So, like a company pension scheme, you know, if the company is paying in a contribution for its employees, they can write that off against their corporation tax as an expense in the profit and loss account. And there's no benefit. You know, the way if an employer pays for health insurance, there's benefit in kind on that particular benefit. There's tax on it. On a pension contribution, there isn't. There's no benefit in kind for the employee. So this is just an example, 100% contribution, and I suppose it shows the difference between a higher taxpayer and a lower taxpayer. So 100% contribution, and a traditional pension scheme, somebody who's paying 40% on tax, income tax, on a 100% contribution, sorry, €100 contribution, the state pays €40 basically through tax relief and source, and the employee pays 60. With auto enrolment, obviously, it's not done through tax relief. The state pays or gives a bonus of 25 euro a month, and basically the employee pays 75. For the lower taxpayer, the state pays the bonus €20 and the employee pays 80. So I suppose for higher taxpayers, auto enrolment doesn't give them the same benefit, because effectively, inverted commas, the tax relief is about 25%. If they were enrolled in a company pension scheme, they get 40% tax break on their contribution. Is that okay? So I suppose choosing the correct option. I mean, I have a lot of companies coming to me and saying, "Now, listen, we're finding it difficult to get staff. You know, we're up against the big guys and we're paying a decent salary. What else can we do?" A lot of these companies may not have thought about putting in a company pension scheme at this moment in time. But I've seen in the last year or two, companies, small, medium companies with maybe 10 or 12 staff, saying, "Listen, yes, I think when employees come to us looking for a job, they look for extra benefits, not just salary. You know, do you provide health insurance? Do you provide a company pension scheme?" So it's a way of actually, I suppose, getting good staff, hiring good staff, and trying to keep them, because obviously staff will move. And I think if you have a very good employee benefits package, and it doesn't have to cost. I mean, I've done one or two mortgage seminars with companies that we provide free of charge with a colleague of mine. We don't do mortgages, we do the life cover, but I bring in somebody from an institution, and we provide that as a free service to companies. So they're getting something back to their staff, and it doesn't cost them. So the choices employers make regarding auto enrolment in Ireland are not just about compliance. They directly shape the financial future of employees, influence workforce satisfaction, and enhance the company's reputation. So you're building a good team and trying to drive the company on with benefits, not just salary oriented. By investing in the employee's retirement security through proper enrolment and contribution, employers not only meet legal requirements, but also foster long-term loyalty, attract top talent, and contribute to a more sustainable economy. That's my point. And I know a lot of you here have small companies, and it's fantastic to see the work that's done here. But we don't all, like, you can put an employee package together that doesn't cost, like I said. You can provide them with maybe once a year a financial planning free review. But obviously benefits are important as well, because you're competing with other SMEs. This just shows, I suppose, what are the options to consider, and the graphic there just shows, I suppose, it gives a pictorial of how AE works. But the options to consider, I think, for employers is, one is to continue to provide a company pension scheme or PRSA benefits. PRSA just stands for Personal Retirement Savings Account. It's just a flexible retirement vehicle that is an alternative to a company pension scheme that's earmarked for your retirement. It's like the old SSIA for people that are my age. And and adopt AE on commencement for those outside of the existing benefits. That's one option. Employees enrolled onto AE until such time as salary, performance, service, etc., warrants progression onto the company scheme. So it's an incentive. And then the last one, new employees given access to company pension scheme immediately. So any new employees basically would be given access if the company has a scheme set up already immediately. Will new employees be auto-enrolled straight away? The answer is, if they meet the criteria, yes. There are no waiting periods for an auto-enrollment scheme, so it's interesting. If you take on a new employee, obviously there's normally a probationary period of 6 months. That can't happen with auto-enrollment. The minute the employee starts working with you and meets the criteria, they have to be auto-enrolled, despite the fact that they're on probation. New employees who have an earnings record with revenue where they have earned 20,000 or more in a year will be automatically enrolled. Cover that. So sometimes we get asked, well, what happens if the employee doesn't have a track record in relation to salary? Basically, for new employees who have no previous earnings record or a gap between their previous and new employment, enrollment will take up to 13 weeks while it's established if they will likely meet the earnings threshold of 20,000. So it might take 13 weeks, basically, for the authority to look back and see if you meet the criteria. There's a lot of still uncertainty around auto enrolment, and we're waiting for the department to obviously inform, employers and ourselves as advisors. One of the things I saw there recently, I was telling Jack there a few minutes ago, that you can see there the employee contribution in the first 3 years is 1.5% of salary, which is quite low. And there's a bit of move to try and get the employee contribution to be able, for the employee to be able to pay in a bit more. You've often heard of additional voluntary contributions, ADCs they're called. It's just a top up on your main scheme, pension scheme. So there's a bit of push on that to see if an employee wants to pay more than 2% or 1.5% that he's or she is has to pay into auto enrolment. You know, they should be given the option if they want to pay more, to give themselves a better outcome at retirement if they wanted to. So, folks, at this stage, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Jack, who's going to take you through the second part of the presentation. As I said, we'll take questions at the very end, and shall I talk to you in a few minutes?
Morning, folks. Thanks, Niall and George, for having us here. It's great to get the opportunity to speak to entrepreneurs like yourselves. As Niall's covered there, the fundamentals of auto enrolment is slightly been very changeable the last year, 2 years, in the sense that don't fully know what way it's going, when it's starting. I suppose our job as financial planners is to educate directors, sole traders, entrepreneurs such as yourselves as to make the most prudent decision for their business. As employers, you'll know that you have two different types of employees. You have your employee that is tuned into their pension contributions, wants to get the most out of the benefit and remuneration package. You'll have employees that the thought of €1 being deducted from their pay slip, they won't like it. So it's just to find the right medium that suit both. Try and keep everyone happy, which obviously isn't always easy. One potential solution for auto enrolment, and I suppose touching on what Niall said there with regards to probationary periods, is that all new staff will be auto enrolled straight away in the auto enrolment scheme. This applies to new starters, short-term employees, potentially roles which may have a higher turnover of staff. And it's very straightforward. It's easily explained to new employees, and it does benefit that worker that's on the 20% marginal rate of tax. given that the employer, the state top up is equivalent to 25% tax relief, as opposed to the company pension scheme where an employer pays a contribution, the employee will pay a contribution and get 20% relief. So it benefits the lower salaried worker. With a company pension scheme, which would be your group scheme or a group PRSA scheme, what we have looked at is where this could be implemented. Management and senior positions are staff with more than 6 months service. So again, touching back on employees' attitudes to investing in their retirement, and this would be an incentive. You know, the longer service served at your company, potentially a bigger employer contribution. You're added onto your company pension scheme, which has more benefits to it. Staff looking to contribute more than the auto enrolment percentage. So obviously at the moment, 1.5%. So the maximum and the minimum contribution is the same. So there's no facility there for an employee to say, I have the scope there to put in an extra 1% or 2% to maximize my lump sum at retirement. But with auto enrolment, you can't do that with the company pension or PRSA account. So ideal for an employee in that position. Early retirement, and again, this could touch on company directors too, where maybe an exit strategy from a business that the long-term plan could be to sell, or an employee looking to retire early at 60 years of age as opposed to 66. With their company pension, you can do that. With auto enrolment, it's 66. Obviously, we've seen the pension age increase recently. If it does increase again, we'd be assuming that auto enrolment would follow that too. So it's inextricably linked with the state retirement age, 66. Limitations of auto enrolment, I probably covered a bit of it there, but retirement is strictly linked to the pension age of 66. The minimum and maximum contribution rates are the same. No wiggle room there. It is what it is, set in stone by NERSA. State contribution of 25%. Your higher earner, which is paying 40% income tax, for every €100 an employee contributes, they get €40 back in their tax return at the end of the year, or more commonly, it's deducted at source, so it's done for you via your pay slip. So it's a lot more advantageous to your higher earner. With auto enrolment, you have 4 investment choices, as opposed to your company pension, your PRSA. You have pages of funds that the likes of myself and Niall will advise you to invest in, given your tolerance to risk or what your goals are, your retirement goals. With auto enrolment, you have 4 funds. You have low, medium, high, and you have what's called a default strategy, whereby, depending on your age, you would be invested. To give an example of someone in their 20s, they could be invested for 10 years at a high risk fund. As they get a little bit older, drop down to medium, and for their years relative to their retirement, they'll be dropped into a lower risk fund. So it's done for you. So you do get a lot more investment choice, and you can tailor your investment strategy a lot better via company pension or PRSA. As of today, your max lump sum that you can take at retirement is 25% of your pot. And you will have some employees that will want to maximize that 25% lump sum. So we will take an example there. As financial advisors, we aim to get our clients up to a minimum pot of retirement of about 800,000. 25% of that 800,000 is 200,000, which will be taken tax-free from the day you retire. So where you have someone that maybe is trying to maximize that 25% lump sum of retirement, they can fund more via ABCs, etc. With auto enrolment, you can't. It is what it is. What's in the pot is in the pot. So again, no facility to make a single premium or one-off contribution. A death benefit, as Niall was saying earlier, funds paid with the estate are taxable. Again, it's a little bit of a grey area. We would all be used to the fact that spouse would inherit tax-free. It appears that they're still working on that at the minute, but the wording at the moment is that it is taxable. Similar to an ARC, which would be an approved retirement fund, it appears that it's going to be taxed at source. Now, the only benefit of that is it would not come off your capital acquisitions tax threshold, but you're still paying a tax on it. Again, it's to be ironed out, but if we have any more information on it, we'll make it available to George to share it. And lastly, there, I suppose, with Auto Enrolment, there's no advice. As financial advisors, we're here to educate and help you make the right decisions. But at the same time, we would expect as government representative to be here to do that too. And there's very limited information coming out. It's a day by day, week by week. So there's no advice coming there from the state or for individuals as to how they should invest their retirement pot. Question that's very common from business owners and directors is can I avoid it? Is there a way out? I think it's kind of probably an Irish thing. What's the easy way out of this? If an employee is a member of your company pension, occupational pension, PRSA, and it's been facilitated through payroll, so if an employee gets their pay slip and there's pension on it, effectively you're exempt. You're not auto enrolled. In time, standards will be introduced where it's the best pot wins. So to give a working example, we have a business in the incubation over here paying a contribution 2%, employer contribution, and auto enrollment paying 4%. Well, then in that case, it would be best pot win scenario whereby either the company would have to match the 4% contribution or the employee would be auto enrolled. But that won't happen straight away. It will be down the line when that is implemented, so it's nothing to worry about in the short term. So effectively, a pension contribution to payroll, be it employee or employer, that effectively takes a box for auto enrollment. You want to be auto enrolled. Also, if you're a class S PRSI, which means you're self-employed company director, you're exempt from auto enrollment. I suppose just touching on this with option number 4 there, if there is some sort of a deduction going through payroll where there's a PRSA with an employer not contributing or a company pension. More than I was saying there, it's not all about salary now for employees when they're making a decision where they want to work. It's about, is there healthcare? Is there my birthday off? Is there a pension? What's the pension contribution? It's not just salary as it was before. And I suppose to give you an example, speaking to HR professional recently, and the communication that we've got is that employees want to know what the full package is. Give you another example for a large retailer in the West of Ireland region that we would have as clients. An employee do not want to know about a pension deduction. I want every euro that I'm getting into my hand. So it's just about managing it as best as possible that employer and employees are benefiting both equally from it. Can employees opt out? Yes, they can, but they'll be auto enrolled for the first 6 months automatically, and that's once they're in the 23 to 60 age category and you're earning above 20,000, they're auto enrolled. You can opt out then in months 7 and 8. So you have an option there in them 2 months that you can opt out, and what happens is the employee gets a refund of their contributions. The employer and the state don't. So what's in the pot is in the pot. Employees who opt out or suspend their contributions are automatically re-enrolled after 2 years, providing that they still meet the criteria. So in essence, the example that we had there, John, who was an intern on 20 grand, he'll be auto enrolled at month 7 and 8, he can opt out, but then he's automatically enrolled again in 2 years' time, where then he has a further option to get out at month 7 and 8. If an employee leaves service and is enrolled in a company pension, a vesting period can apply. So one of the options as employers when setting up a company pension is that you can have a vesting period in your benefit. This basically means that where you have 100% vesting, that means that your employer contributions are 100% vested in the pension pot and they're not coming out. Where they're not vested and there's a vesting period, it essentially means that if an employee leaves service and leaves your company pension scheme within a certain time frame, that the employer gets a refund of their contributions. So that will be talking point for employers, and definitely something for them to think about. Especially in growing enterprises, where cash flow might be a little bit tight starting out. This means employer contributions are funded if the employee leaves within 2 years of joining the scheme. And if an employee leaves service while it's auto enrolled, employer contributions stay in the pot. So once they're paid, they're paid. What can businesses do to prepare? Well, I think if we had a date that's auto enrollment was starting, it would be a lot easier to prepare for. But in the meantime, we have to do what we can. There's 4 critical areas that all employers should be honing in on: payroll contracts, communication with employees, and their financial management and cash flow. Consultation with providers of payroll systems and software used by employers, because obviously for the facilitation of pension contributions and auto enrollment payments, that's going to be critical. For contract purposes, your HR departments will obviously be all over this at the minute, or they will be in time. It is critical to have it very clear in your contracts of employment for new starters. How is it going to work? When are they going to be all enrolled? Have they got the option to join a company pension scheme, etc.? Communication with employees, probably a massive area that stays falling down in terms of auto enrollment, where our guess is as good as anyone else's, barring that obviously communication we get from various investment companies and from the Department of Social Protection. But when more information becomes readily available, there's a slide. It's very important to keep your employees in the know, so that it's not a shock when it does come in. And the last thing there is financial management. Cash flow management will be critical, and especially, I suppose, the gearing of employer contributions from 1.5 to 6% over time. The projections are going to be key there. I'll finish off on a quote there from Warren Buffett, who's the most well-known investor in the world, from Berkshire Hathaway. Look for people to hire. We look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, energy. And if you don't have the first, those two will kill you. So I suppose, how is this relevant to employees? Employees are the driving force behind any business, and it is single most important quality any business will have. So it is very important that it benefits both employees and employers, and that you're doing everything to retain those quality employees that you have.